If there's no question, then first of all, let me show you here. You can see NSG outbound, that is allowed. Connectivity test, which is failed just because ICMP is disabled in both virtual machines. If you remember, in operating system firewall, ICMP is disabled. That's why connectivity test is failed. Otherwise, NSG outbound, NSG inbound, that is open. Correct. Next hop. So there is no next hop. We are using system route, which you can see here. Route table is system route here. Destination post accessible. Yes. Source port is accessible. Yes. So there's no connectivity. Correct. Now let me delete my resource group for module 6. Module number 7, administering Azure storage services. So when it comes to storing data, so we have three options, like I can store structured data. When it comes to structured storage, it means we are going to create a table and my data will be stored into row and columns inside my table, where schema will be fixed like SQL database. Schema will be fixed. That is called structured database. Then we have semi-structured database. If I'm saying semi-structured database, it means you will create your table. Inside table, your data will be stored into document, like a document like JSON, in key and value. As a key and value data will be stored, and schema will be dynamic. So in semi-structure, you will get dynamic schema. It means you can change attributes of your table. Simple to understand. The third option, unstructured. When I'm saying unstructured, what it does mean? It means if where I cannot predict my data format, in which format I'm ingesting data, that I cannot predict, like video, images, document file, PDF file, Excel sheets, so PowerShell scripts. I cannot predict my data format, so I will store my data into unstructured storage, that is known as object-based storage as well, blob storage as well. Correct. Binary storage also you can say. So binary storage, text-based storage, blob storage, object storage, all are same. That is known as unstructured storage. Correct. When it comes to Azure Storage Services, so in Azure Storage Services, you will get storage account. And in storage account, you will get 4 types of services. Like you will get table service. You will get file service. You will get message service. You will get container, that means blob service. Correct. If you will compare with AWS, so for table, we have tabular databases, or we can use a DynamoDB. When it comes to file, we have EFS and FSX into AWS. For messaging, we have SQS service into AWS, and for container, we have S3 service. For blobs, we have S3 service into AWS. So in AWS, you will get different services. Into Azure, we have a single service that is known as storage account, in which you will get all 4 services, for which you will get different URLs, and it will be accessible over the internet using REST API, HTTP and HTTPS protocol. So configuring storage account, first lesson. If I'll show you lessons, so configuring storage account, configuring blob storage, configuring storage security, configuring Azure files. So we have 4 lessons into this module. Let me start lesson number 1, exploring Azure Storage Services. So first service, container, that means blob for unstructured data. A massively scalable object store for text or binary data. It means for unstructured data. So you will create a container into storage account like blobs, and in which you will ingest your data, images, documents, video, audio, big data files, backup files, database files, log files. When it comes to blobs, so into Azure containers, we can store three types of blobs. Base blob, block blob, and append blob. Base blob, block blob, and append blob by default. So block blob will be default option for unstructured data, in which you will store unstructured data. So when I'm saying default, what it does mean, it means while uploading your data, if you will not select any option, so it means by default your data will be stored into block blob, and that is recognized as a unstructured data. Base blob, which is basically designed for virtual hard disk, for VHD. So if you are going to store your virtual machine hard disk, it will be stored into base blob. Append blob, basically, which is designed for logging purpose, for log files. Then we have table storage, where we can create tables and we can store our tabular data. Queue, messaging data. Files, similar to on-premise NAS. So this would be replacement of on-premise NAS, network attached storage, where you would be able to store your data into SMB share, and Azure supports SMB 3.0 protocol, and nowadays NFS is also supported, network file share. We can create a file share which we can connect to multiple virtual machine, either into Azure or into on-premises, and we would be able to share our data among multiple servers using a share storage. Yes, Nico.
I just have a question with blobs. Is this the same as an SFTP server?
So blob is, you are comparing with
For SFTP server in terms of for on-prem, this one
SFTP,
can
correct?
be.
Secure File Transfer Protocol. So when it comes to SFTP or FTP, correct? SFTP or
Yes.
FTP. So it means we are going to use a network share, network server, which we can access using a network address, correct? Within the
Yeah.
organization or
Is
outside the
this
organization.
does a blob can be a private or a public one
So
in
we can
terms of
decide. We
IP?
can use a blob as a private, but in private it means only owner can access if it will be private. We can make blob public if it will be public. Then you can decide which blob, that means which container, and what permission you are going to apply on that container. That means you can open your containers publicly, but you will decide permission, read, write, and execute. That you can decide, and we have different ways for that, for public. But when it will be
Okay, okay.
private, in private situation, only owner. That means if I create it, I can only access in private way. No one can else can access. Correct? That is known as private.
But for private, can it be on a group of people or
So for group
an
of peoples, what we can do, we can use Azure
active directory?
RBAC, Azure RBAC, RBAC. That means Azure AD authentication we can use.
Okay. Yeah.
Correct?
Thanks, Sanjay. Yeah.
Welcome. So blob is basically, it's a unstructured storage here, correct, which we can use to store our unstructured data, and we can distribute this data. We can use for backup, we can use for streaming videos, we can use for serving images, documents to our website, or we can host a static website as well. Azure tables, ideal for storing structured known relational database. Azure queues, a messaging store for reliable messaging between application component. Any idea what would be where we will use Azure queues or where we will use messaging services? Any idea, anyone? So messaging queues will be used in between your tiers. Like this would be your front end, then you have back end, then you have database. So in between front end and back end, you can use queue. In between back end and database, you can use queue. Front end will receive messages, continuous messages, which will be sent to these queues. And whenever your backend servers will be available, they will pull these messages from queue and they will process those messages. And then most processed message will be stored into this queue. And then when database server will be available, they will fetch this message, they will pull this message, and they will store this message into database table. That is called messaging. You will get a buffer memory in between your tiers. That is known as queue services, messaging services. Azure Files is a managed file share for cloud and on-premise deployment. It means you can connect to cloud virtual machines as well as to your on-premise servers and virtual machines, and you will be able to share your data. Determining storage kinds. So we have different kinds of storage like standard general purpose version 2, in which you will get all services. Like you will get blob, file, queue, table, as well as data lake storage. Again, any idea where we are using data lake storage? So storing data into blob container, you will not get any hierarchical structure. And when it comes to big data analytics, so if you have an application, big data application, where you want to run your algorithm, so and you want to use blob storage, so we have to enable data lake storage on blob, so that whatever data you're ingesting into blob, you can use big data application and your data will be stored into a hierarchical structure using data lake. So data lake generation 2 is nowadays supported. Premium blobs. What if I need only blob with high speed, high transaction, high throughput? So blob scenario where you need high transaction rates, that is SSD backed volumes. You will use premium blob. That is for unstructured data. Premium file share. If I need high speed file share, enterprise high performance file share application, I will use premium file share. That means I have only a requirement where I need only a file share which should be high performance. I will create a storage account with premium file share only. Premium pays blob for virtual machine hard disk, where I will get SSD backed virtual machine hard disk for high performance. I will create only pays blobs with premium service. So you will get different types of storage kind which you will select based on your requirement. So based on your requirement, you can choose whether you should use you need to use standard or premium block, premium pays or premium file share. It depends on your requirement. Replication. So whenever you will create storage account, so replication will be there. Storage account, replication will be there. So you have to select your replication strategy. Based on that, Microsoft will replicate your data. So let me explain you all these replication options. So first option is within the region, that is single region. In single region, we have two options, LRS and ZRS. What it does mean by LRS? LRS means, let me draw here. LRS means if I'm talking about within the region, so in within the region there would be multiple availability zones, that means data centers would be there. So this would be our region in which we have multiple data centers. Region AZ1, AZ2, AZ3, and in different availability zone you will get racks which will be isolated from other availability zone, and inside your rack you will get your servers, host servers, and there would be all these data centers are interconnected through high fiber private cable. Now, when it comes to LRS means we are talking about a single availability zone. It means we are talking about this zone. So Azure will create 3 copies of your data, 3 replicas, 1 region and 1 availability zone. It protects against disk. It means it will protect against disk, against node and rack failure. So it means data will be stored into multiple disks. First copy here, second here, third here. Correct. So if node fail where your disk is attached, or if rack fails, still you would be able to perform read and write within the availability zone. Correct. It will protect you against disk, node and rack failure. What if data center fails? If complete AZ fails, then we need to think about next solution. If our data is business critical data. Write is acknowledged when all replicas are committed. What it does mean? It means when your all replicas will be stored on all nodes, then write will be acknowledged and you would be able to read your data. This is similar to dual parity RAID. If my availability zone fails and I have a business critical data, so I need to think next situation. So where we will use ZRS, Zone Redundant Storage. In Zone Redundant Storage, again, Azure will create 3 replicas. So first replica will be stored into first availability zone, second will be stored into second availability zone, and third will be stored into third availability zone, which will protect your data from disk failure, node failure, rack failure, as well as zone failure. So if one DC fails, still you would be able to perform read and write within the region, correct, from other data centers. All replicas will be synchronous. That means in real time. Real time replication will be there in between your zones, correct? What if regions fail? Whole region fail. If whole region fail, it means all availability zones are down. So what would be next situation? Next situation will be multi-region replication. When it comes to multi-region replication, first option is GRS, Geo Redundant Storage. In Geo Redundant Storage, Microsoft will create 3 copies into primary region as a LRS, which will be replicated as a LRS. So first your replica will be replicated into primary, and once acknowledged will be committed here for write. After then this will be replicated to secondary data center, which will be 300 miles away, correct? And here again Microsoft will create 3 copies of your data into secondary data center as a LRS replication, correct? So all read and write requests will be sent to primary region. That means 100% read and write requests will be sent to primary region. Secondary will be standby only. So when primary will be down, in that case you will do failover to secondary, and then you would be able to perform read and write requests to secondary. It means, remember one thing, on secondary data center, secondary region, you will get always stale data, just because it would be a asynchronous replication. So not in real time. So there would be delay in the application. That is called GRS application. 6 replicas, 2 regions, 3 per region. Protect against major regional disaster, asynchronous copy to secondary region. Now another option we have RAGRS. All feature of GRS you will get into RAGRS along with one extra feature, which would be read access. What it does mean by read access? So 3 copies into primary region, 3 copies into secondary region. Primary will be available as well as secondary will be available. In GRS, secondary will be standby. So now you will get 2 endpoints, primary and secondary, and both will be accessible parallelly. So what I can do to increase performance of my storage, my write request I can send to primary and read request I can send to secondary. That is called read access. So GRS plus read access to secondary. So you can redirect your all read requests to secondary region. So separate secondary endpoint you will get. Recovery point objective RPO, delay to secondary can be queried. That means if there would be primary will be down. Again, here we are getting a asynchronous data. So RPO we need to calculate the data loss, recovery point of objective. Hope you all remember which we discussed on day 1, RTO and RPO, recovery time objective and recovery point of objective. Next option, which are recently introduced by Microsoft into replication, GZRS. So GZRS means in primary reason. So previously in GRS and RAGRS, replication in primary reason similar to LRS, secondary reason similar to LRS, correct? But in GZRS, if you will check, in primary reason, your data will be replicated. It means Microsoft will create 3 copies which will be replicated across the availability zone within the primary reason, correct? Like ZRS. And then asynchronous replication, then replication will be start and it will be replicated to secondary reason, 3 copies like LRS, correct? So now here you will get advantage. If one zone goes down, still you would be able to perform read and write operation to your other data center. If my reason will be down, in that case I have to do failover to secondary reason. So as compared to GRS, here you will get more flexibility. So 6 replicas, 3 plus 1 zones, 2 reasons, protect against disk, node, rack, zone and reason failure. Synchronous write to all 3 zones, that means within the reason, and asynchronous copy to secondary reason. Next option again, RAGRS. So similar to, RAGZRS, similar to RAGRS. So in primary reason, replication will be done into multiple availability zone like ZRS. After then, asynchronous read to secondary reason like LRS, 3 copies, and we will get parallel read access to secondary. Here, secondary will be standby. So GZRS plus read access to secondary, separate secondary endpoint. RPO delay to secondary can be queried just because if primary will be down, so we have to calculate data loss, which you can calculate through RPO, recovery point of objective. That is called replication options into Azure Storage account, which we will check practically into next session, correct? I'll show you practically all these things we'll discuss there. When it comes to accessing your storage services, so if you are accessing container services, so it will start with HTTPS secure endpoint, then your storage account name. If you remember, while creating storage account, you should provide a unique name. Why? Just because your name will be included into URL. After then your service name, blob, then DNS suffix of Azure, core.windows.net. Again, table services. If you're going to access table services over the internet, it will start with HTTPS, then storage account name, service name, table, after then suffix of Azure Storage account. Queue service start with HTTPS, storage account name, service name queue, then DNS suffix of Azure Storage account. File services start with HTTPS, storage account name, service name file, and Azure DNS. You can use your custom DNS as well, where you can create a CNAME record into your DNS and you would be able to use your domain name as well while accessing your storage account. Securing storage endpoint. So how we can create a secure endpoint? We can, if you remember, we already discussed about service endpoint. So we can, by default, all storage services, all storage account will be open for public. As you can see, enable from all networks. It means public access will be there. Correct. So what we can do, we can use second option, enable from selected virtual network and IP address. It means we are going to enable service endpoint. And I'll show you practically, we will test this. It means I'm going to limit my traffic to a VNet. So if I'll receive a request from inside this VNet, I will only entertain. Except in this VNet, I will discard all the requests. That is called secure endpoint, which I can do. So firewall and virtual networks restrict access to storage accounts from specific subnet or virtual networks or public IP addresses. So subnet and virtual network must exist in the same region. Just because it's a regional service, region pairs as the storage account. So we will discuss all these topics practically into next session. we are done for today's session, and we will start this module practically on next week, and we will test storage account next week. Yes, Nico, if you have any query, you can ask your question.
I just wondering, is the container service kind of like a uh a a public access, even though we can configure it for a private IP?
So again, when
For
it
example,
will,
let me give an example for uh an SFTP, right, earlier. So if there's an SFTP client which is internal in our company and wants to access a blob and use it as a SFTP server. So if we allow it in our firewall using an FQD using that FQDN that you shown earlier, right?
Mhm.
Is that still external facing?
So your firewall would be inside your on-premise, correct?
Yes, yeah.
So first, what you need to do, as you can see, I'm inside my storage service, correct? And I'm inside in container services, where you can see I have a container videos, and where I have one video, which you can see here, correct? So first of all, this video access level is private, which you can see. Let me make it private. So it's private. It means no one can access. If I'll share URL with you, let me open the URL. So if I'll share URL with you, no one can access this video using this URL, which I shared in the chat box. Check and confirm.
Yeah.
Correct. So let me change my private access, my level, privacy level to blob read only. So now once I will change my access level, you would be able to stream this video using that URL which I shared. Correct?
I'm trying to refresh, but yep,
Mm.
it's working out.
So you will face some latency just because I created this storage account into Central India. Correct? So there would be some latency. Now assume if you want to serve this document, video and container privately. So first what you will do, you will go to networking section of the storage account, correct? Where you can see why you are able to access this video, just because it's enabled for public access, which you can see here, enable for all access. So first you will limit your traffic to a virtual network, correct? So you have to connect this storage account to Azure VNet, where you have NSGs, Network Security Group, and then you will enable VPN connection for on-premise, where you have on-premise firewall, correct? And after then you will add your DNS endpoint. Let me show you from where you will get endpoint. Yeah, from here you will get all the endpoints. So from here you will select your blob endpoint, which you can see this would be your blob endpoint. So this endpoint you will enter into your firewall. But first you have to create a VPN hybrid connectivity from on-premise to Azure Virtual Network, and then you need to limit your traffic, storage account traffic to virtual network using this option. Then you would be able to access privately this blob using your firewall and your internal connectivity.
So
Hope
in
it,
this part, we can assign the private IP. Okay.
for assigning private IP, we have private endpoint, which you can see here, private endpoint access. If you will
Oh,
select this private endpoint access, so Microsoft will create a LAN card which will be associated for this storage account dedicatedly, and which will get a private IP address, correct? But ultimately you have to create hybrid connectivity first. Then you would be able to use privately using private IP address. We can associate private IP address to the storage account using this option, private endpoint connection.
so hybrid connectivity first, and then
First hybrid
okay.
connectivity, and then you will create private endpoint. To create private endpoint, you have to select your options. Let me show you like let me give some name here like demo12, and my nickname will be this. Let me go to next resource. It means I have to provide for which resource I'm going to get a private IP address, where you can select blob, correct? Like your SFTP blob, and after then your virtual network, from where you will get a private IP address, correct? So you have to select your virtual network, which is mapped to your on-premise network, data
Okay.
center network. So this would be the process that is known as private endpoint.
Thanks, Angie. Yeah.
We're going to start with account, and we will complete module practically, and then we will review the pending theory. So let me start with, and if you have any query in between or any question, you can unmute yourself, just because I'm not using second screen, double screen, correct? So you can unmute yourself and you can ask your question. So let me go to my portal and let me search storage account service. So you can see, you will type your keywords into the search bar and you will get your service storage account, which you have to select. Select storage account, click on create. So when it comes to creating storage account, first of all, we have to create a resource group. Let me create a new resource group, or you can use existing resource group as well if you have. So let me create a new resource group, M7 RG1 module 7 resource group 1. After then storage account name. So storage account name which would be unique. Why? Just because this name will be included into your URL. If you remember, we already discussed in theory session where you will get few endpoints for your services, like for blob, for file, for table, for queue. So when it comes to blob or file or for table or queue, so it will start with HTTPS and then colon slash slash and storage account name, and after then your service name. So it should be unique over the internet. Let me check. Sanjay Cognitia, this name will be available. So Sanjay Cognitia, if your name is not available, so you can use some random numbers. Now reason I'm going with Central India here. Performance, we have two performance methods here, standard and premium. So standard, in which you will get all four services, like you will get file, table, queue, and blob service, as well as you will get data lake generation to support. That means for big data analytics, you can you can use this as your storage accounts storage. When it comes to premium, in premium you will get premium services like premium blob, premium page blob, file share. So let me show you. If you select premium, so which type of premium service you need. So here you can see blobs, file share, page. When it comes to storing data into blobs, so we have three types of blob. Blob, which would be your default blob. It means this which is used for unstructured storage. Correct, where you can store your base data or MongoDB data. That is known as your blob. So that is your by default storage for container services, for blob services and premium. And you will get fast transaction rate, high throughput, the bad volumes. When it comes to premium, file share, which you can see. So file share is basically its replacement of on-premise NAS, network attached storage. So which you will get as a file share into Azure, where you will get SMB based file share and NFS based file share, which is recently introduced by Microsoft. And SMB 3.0 file share you will get. So you can create a file share which you can mount to multiple systems, like on Azure virtual machines or your on-premise virtual machines, or on Linux, Windows, or Mac, and you can share your data among multiple instances, multiple systems. When it comes to page blobs, so page blob basically used for VHT. So if you need a high transaction rate for high IO, high transaction rate for your virtual hard disk, so you need a premium page blob in which you will get SSD backed volumes. So it depends on you again. Based on your requirement, you will choose either premium or standard. I'm going with standard. If you will choose standard or premium, so based on your selection, you will get redundancy option. And I hope you all remember redundancy option, which we already discussed. LRS, GRS, ZRS, correct? So hope you all remember. If I'm going to select standard, so you can see here, we will get all options here based on the regions as well. It depends on the options, redundancy option. It depends on the region as well. When it comes to premium, if I will select premium, so here you can see we have only two options, LRS and ZRS in premium. So again, based on all criteria, based on your requirement, based on redundancy, based on performance, I will choose either premium or standard. I'm going with standard, and let me select here LRS. We can change our redundancy option later once my storage account will be created. So this would be a basic tab setup. Let me go to next tab, advanced tab. On advanced tab, you can see here requires secure transfer for REST API operations, which is by default enabled. If you want, you can disable it. Allow enable anonymous access on individual containers. So if you will allow this, so on container services, anonymous access will be allowed, but you have to enable permission. It doesn't mean that anyone can access. This permission is allowed for your storage account. But whenever you will create a container, you have to manually enable your permissions, where you can enable read permission or for blob or for container. It depends on you basically. Enable storage account key access. When it comes to authentication, so how you will authenticate yourself or for other users. So we have different methods where we have default method storage keys. So which would be default method account keys. And if you will share account key with someone, so basically you will get complete full access, full admin access on your storage account. Second authentication method is RBAC, role-based access control, where I can use my Azure AD user account and RBAC permissions. So default Entra authorization, that means Azure Active Directory authorization for your users in portal, which you can enable here. TLS version, so TLS encryption you will get, you can select your TLS version here. I'm going with the default one. So permitted scope for copy operations, which is in preview, in beta. So whenever any point, any service which would be in beta, it means you will not get any question into your certification for beta services or services which would be in preview. But what it is, it means I can copy data from where? From any storage account in my account, from storage account in the same Azure AD tenant, or storage account that have private endpoint within the virtual network, within the same virtual network. So I can choose from where I'm going to copy data in my storage account. That I can choose based on my requirement. Hierarchical namespace, what it is, again, that is not relevant to our syllabus or our certification, but when it comes to big data analytics and when we are storing data into blob containers, so you will not get a hierarchical design into blob container. That means folder, inside folder, another folder, so and then a hierarchy. But when it comes to big data analytics, so you need hierarchical structure for data storage. In that case, you can enable this option, and where you would be able to use big data, your data lake storage, which you can enable. Correct? I'm not going to enable it. Here you can see blob and data lake generation 2 endpoints provision by default. So we have to enable hierarchical namespace. After then you will enable your big data analytics generation 2, data lake generation 2, and you would be able to store your data. Enable SFTP, which you can see that is grayed out based on the hierarchical namespace. If I will enable it, then I would be able to enable SFTP, Secure File Transfer Protocol. NFS, again, based on the hierarchical namespace, I will enable NFS also. So NFS version 3, which is supported here. Allow cross-tenant replication. So I can enable replication for cross-tenant. Cross-tenant means if we have storage account in different AD tenant, Microsoft Entra ID tenant, we would be able to replicate our data, blob data. Access tier. So by default, we have odd access tier. Odd access tier means where we are going to store frequently accessed data, data which we are accessing frequently. That type of data we can store into hot tier. When it comes to cool tier means infrequently accessed data, which I am accessing once in a month or twice in a month. So that type of data is known as cool data, or you can say cold data. When it comes to archive means data which I'm not accessing more than 60 days. That type of data is known as archive data. And here you will not get archive storage, but yes, when you will upload any blob, definitely you will get a archive option where you can choose in which type of storage. If you will not select any access tier, then the default one will be hot. And hot is most expensive storage access tier, just because your data will be stored into frequently access method, and this would be expensive option. And cheapest option will be access archive tier, where you will archive your data and you have to wait for retrieval time. If you can afford retrieval duration, wait, then you can store your data into archival storage, which will be the most cheapest access tier into Azure. Enable large file share. So where by default for Azure file share, you will get 5 TB storage. If you have to store large files like up to 100 TB, you can enable this feature, which you can read here. Provide file share support up to a maximum of 100 TB. By default, you will get 5 TB. If you want more than 5 TB up to 100 TB, you can enable it. And again, there would be charges based on the storage which we will utilize. There would be charges into Azure Storage account services. Let me go to next networking tab. On networking tab, as you can see, we have a network access. By default, publicly your storage account is accessible. That means we can receive requests from anywhere. Correct? Second option is enable public access from selected virtual networks and IP address. It means what I can do, I can enable a service endpoint. Hope you all remember we discussed about service endpoint. So I can enable a service endpoint, and where if my virtual networks virtual machine will send request over the internet to my storage account services, then this storage account will be accessible, except then my virtual network resources. If I'm receiving requests from anywhere, this will be discarded by my storage account, just because I'm limiting my traffic to virtual network subnets or to a public IP address, which I can add as a client IP address. So I can share my storage account services to a particular public IP address or to my VNet subnet resources. Disable public access, what it does mean? It means if there would be some compliance rule which state that there would be no outbound internet access into your VNet resources. In that case, you cannot use service endpoint, just because ultimately using service endpoint, we are sending requests over the internet, correct? Which will be entertained by my storage account. When it comes to compliances, based on the compliance, if outbound access will be disabled, public access will be disabled. In that case, how we will access storage account? So we will use private endpoint. So in that case, Azure will create a LAN card, which we already discussed in module number 5, correct? So where we will enable a private endpoint and a LAN card will be created by Azure into your subnet, and LAN card will be associated to your storage account. So internally, storage account and subnet resources will be connected internally using private access. That is called private endpoint. By default, we are going with public access. Later, we will check service endpoint. Network routing, when it comes to routing, so we are going to use Microsoft Network Routing, but if you have any shortest path, like you are using some ISP, and your ISP is having shortest path, and where you get less latency as compared to Microsoft Network, you can use internet routing in that case. I'm going with Microsoft Network Routing. Next option is data protection, where we can protect data. So first option is enable point-in-time restore for containers like a snapshot, which we can enable. So if accidentally you will delete your containers, you would be able to recover your container in between. Let me enable it, and let's check the maximum retention point, which you can see. So in between 6 days, that is your retention point where we can retain our data containers. When it comes to enable soft delete for blobs, so if we will, what is blob? Blob like a file, like any image, that is known as blob. Any text file, any PDF file, any Excel sheet, any video file, that is known as blob data into container services. So if we will delete any blob, so we would be able to recover that blob for in between 7 days. That is just because that is the retention period. So soft delete of blobs. That is by default enabled. When it comes to deleting containers, so soft delete for containers is also enabled, where you would be able to recover your container in between 7 days. Enable soft delete for file share. So if you will delete any file share, you would be able to recover your file share in between 7 days. Correct? Let me scroll down here. We can enable tracking for blob services, where you can track all versions, keep all versions. It will enable versioning on your files, on your blobs. So if you are sharing your files, Excel sheets, text files, Word documents, and users who are editing, basically, or adding data into your file, correct? So if any user who deleted some lines accidentally, you would be able to recover, or you would be able to check your previous version of your file through which you would be able to recover your data. Next, you can select delete versions after, that is retention. So where your versions will be deleted after 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, which you can select based on your requirement. Tracking will be enabled. When it's tracking will be enabled, you would be able to track all the modifications, like who is creating blobs, deleting blobs, modifying blobs. All types of tracking will be enabled for your blob. Access control, which we will discuss into our lab session. Let me go to next, encryption. So by default into Azure, all storage accounts are encrypted. So it means data at rest that is encrypted by Microsoft. So encryption and decryption, automatically this will be done by Microsoft using Microsoft managed keys. Correct? Where Microsoft is using AES 256-bit key for encryption. If you want strong encryption, so you can create your own keys as well, which you can create and store into Azure Key Vault. And then you can encrypt that, just because here we are using AES 256-bit encryption keys, which is used by Microsoft. If you want to use different method and different key length, like 2048, so you can create your own keys as well, and you can store those keys into Azure Key Vault, which you can use as your customer managed key, which you can see here. Customer managed key, that is known as customer managed key. But by default, there would be encryption. So your data will be encrypted by default. Enable support for customer managed key. So when we are going to enable customer managed key, so it will be enabled for blob and files only, or for all types of services that you can decide. Ultimately, there would be charges. Correct. So enable infrastructure encryption. Now, what is infrastructure encryption? So infrastructure encryption means double encryption, just because we are only encrypting our files, disk basically. So assume, one second. So in Azure data center, there would be rack. Inside rack, you will get your host server. On your host server, there would be disks, which will be attached, correct, local disk. So if my data is going to be stored inside this disk, so this disk will be encrypted. What about this host? The disk is associated. So if you want double encryption, so you can enable infrastructure encryption, where this host computer will be also encrypted by Microsoft. That is known as host encryption. Encrypt infrastructure, correct, which you can enable. Again, whatever advanced features you will enable, there would be charges based on your selection. Next, tags, which would be optional. Review, it will validate your configuration. Click on create storage account. So it will be created in few seconds. And once it will be created, we will check first container services, second blob services, then permissions, security, and file share. Correct. And then this module will be completed. We will check some tools as well, which you can use to manage the storage account services. So deployment is done for storage account. Now let's go to storage account services. So search storage account, where you can see you will get your newly created storage account. Sanjay Cognitia. Let me open this storage account. So once you will open the storage account, let me guide you a few things. Like as you can see, my performance method is standard, correct? My replication option is LRS, locally redundant storage. So let me go to left hand side and let me scroll down, and under data management, where you can see redundancy option. Click on redundancy and check your redundancy option, where you can change your redundancy option as well. So right now I'm using LRS, where you can see I have only one region in LRS. So within the region, in single data center, Microsoft will replicate 3 copies of data within the data center, which will protect my data from disk failure, from node failure, from rack failure. Correct? What if data center fails? If data center fails, then we can choose next option. That I have to decide this. So I can choose here ZRS, zone redundant storage, which I can choose and I can save. Now choosing zone redundant means again I'm going to use same reason, correct? So this redundancy option failed just because of, let me read this error. So conflicting change feed enabled. So change feed is enabled. If blob change feed will be enabled, so it will keep all the data within the data center only. That's why that is failed. No wise. So we have to change from the property option change feed. Like if I'm going to use here GRS, regional replication or synchronous replication. So GRS will be applicable here, which you can see. So now my replication, which will be changed to GRS, where my primary region is Central India, correct? And I will get secondary region as well. Let me refresh here. And let me show you my endpoints also. So if you will check your endpoints, so you will get here only primary endpoints. Why? Why I'm getting here primary endpoints? I hope you all remember GRS replication. So in GRS application, there would be 2 regions where your data will be replicated, correct? Region 1, primary region, and secondary region. So first 3 copies will be replicated into primary region, and after then, once your replication will be committed into primary region, after then your data will be replicated into secondary region, and 3 copies will be replicated into secondary region, and your replication will be asynchronous. Secondary region will be always your standby region, correct? So primary will be always available, secondary will be standby. What you can do, you will perform failover manually here, which you can see here, prepare for failover. This option is grayed out just because there's no replication done by Microsoft till now, just because we didn't create any container or any blob which we stored or data which we store into our storage account. That's why there's no replication. But whenever you will start using your storage account and your data will be replicated from one region to another region, you would be able to see this option will be enabled here, and you can fail over your region as well from primary to secondary, and secondary will be available at that time. I can choose RAGRS as well. Read access geo redundant storage. Let me click on save. In that case, I would be able to use again in standard SKU. Let me refresh. Let me refresh my browser tab. So standard SKU for RAGRS, that is in progress. We have to wait for few minutes just because that is in progress. The GRS is in progress. So once, just because the application will be started, correct? So we have to wait for few minutes, but yes, we can change after few minutes, we can change RAGRS, and in RAGRS, we would be able to use secondary reason parallelly for read access. Correct. So we can choose and we can change our replication option from left hand side at any time. Now next option is storing data, where we have first option is container services. So in container services, you would be able to see there would be few containers which will be created by Microsoft for blockchain feed, for logs. But when it comes to our end, if you have to upload data, so we will click on create container. That means add container. So container is like a folder. It's like a folder. It's a logical unit here. So like I'm going to create a container images. By default access level, which you can see here, that is private. That means no anonymous access. So on complete container services, public access is enabled, but whenever you will create a container, so there would be only private access which will be enabled, which you can change little. Like I'm going with private access, it means only owner can access data. Except an owner, no one can access. So if I created this container, I can only access my data, which I'm going to upload inside this container. Now, how I will upload my data? I will click on my container name and it will be open, which you can see here, where you can see we have an option upload. Click on upload. Select your files. Click on browse for files. And let me select few images. And let me select one text file as well. And let me show you one more thing. So while uploading your data, like I'm going to upload, let me select one more files. Let me select one more, oh, sorry, I uploaded. Let me select one more file so that I can show you advanced options where you would be able to understand while uploading which option you should select. So when you will select your file, click on advanced option where you can see which type of blob service you're going to use. By default one is blob, but we have three types of blob services. Blob for unstructured data, where you will store your images, document file, backup data, all your video files, Excel sheets, PDF files. Page blob, which will be used for VHD files, virtual hard disk, your virtual machine hard disk. Append blob, which is for logs, logging purpose. So you can decide here. If you will not select, then by default selection is blob. It means you're uploading unstructured data. Next option, blob will be uploaded into chunks. So what would be a chunk size? 4 MB, which you can decide. So minimum will be 64 KB and maximum will be 100 KB. By default will be 4 MB. So you can select which would be your chunk size. That is also known as multi-part upload if you will compare with AWS. Access tier. So here you can see hot is default, infrared, which you can see if you will expand. So we have cool, cold and archive. We can decide in which tier we are going to store our data, and it depends on frequency, how frequently we are accessing our data. Based on that, I can choose my access tier. Upload to folder. What it does mean by upload to folder? Upload to folder means inside this image container, if I'm going to create if I want another folder, so I can provide a folder name here and my file will be uploaded inside a folder. Let me show you. I'm going to create a folder data, and this file will be uploaded, this Databricks file, it will be uploaded into data folder. So here you will get a folder as well. Let me click on upload. You can see one folder data which will be created here, and if you will open data folder, under data folder you will get Databricks file. So that's how we can upload files. Now let me go back and let me show you permission, the default permission. So let me open my image, this JPG image. So whenever you will click on your image name or your file name, blob name, so you will get a URL to access this image. copy this URL. Let me paste into text box as well so that we all can check permission, default permission by shared URL in the chat box. Let me paste this URL into my laptop browser tab. So by default, there would be no permission, which you can see. You all will get error while accessing this file, correct, over the internet. Just because by default, there is no anonymous access that is enabled. Private access is there. So no one can access except the owner who have created this, correct. So if you check here, I'm also accessing over the internet. It means I cannot access. I can download this image and then I can open this image. First option. Second, what if I have to enable permission for everyone so that a users can access? Then in that case, I will go to my container services where you can see there's a tab change access level. Right to this upload. Click on change access level. Click on drop down where you can see we have three options. First is private. Second is blob. Blob means if I will select here blob, anonymous read access for blobs only. If this would be my selection, so users on internet, they can access or they can read these images, correct, but they cannot list my folder inside my container and they cannot read this Databricks file. Why? Just because I selected my permission read blob, so they can only read blob, they cannot list my folder inside my container. What if I have to enable permission to read my blobs as well as to list my container and read blob inside the container, nested container? In that case, I will go to change access level and I will select third option, container. So anonymous read access for containers and blobs. It will enable read permission for all. So I'm going with blob right now. So let me change my permission. And now if you will refresh your browser tab, you would be able to see this image will be accessible, correct? Check and confirm. Same URL if you will open into your laptop, into your browser tab, so image is accessible now. So that's how we can enable permission so that other users, they can access from anyone or anyone can access. If you will share this URL with anyone, so they can access my blob data, correct? That is called blob permission. But here we are limited. That is called legacy permission. Why? We are limited here. We can only enable read permission, correct? What if I have to give some granular permission? Read, write, modify, delete. When it comes to granular permissions, so first option is Azure Active Directory RBAC, Azure Active Directory authentication with RBAC, where you will enable permission for your users. Second option is SAS, shared access signature, in which you would be able to allow your end users to perform different type of actions based on the permission which you will allow, which we will discuss. Let me show you next option. We can enable snapshot as well. What is snapshot? Snapshot means point in time restore, kind of backup. So you can create a snapshot for your blob data. Like, let me show you. Click on create snapshot, which you can see here. Snapshot is created for my blob, correct? Let me open a log file. Let me open the CSV file here. Let me click on edit. But before going to edit any Excel sheet, text file, you should take a snapshot first, so that if you will do some mistake by accidentally, you would be able to recover your file through snapshot. So let me go to now edit tab. Okay, CSV we cannot edit here. We can edit here RTF. Let me open RTF. Let me open this Databricks file. Let me go to snapshots, take snapshot. Let me click on edit tab, where you can see file will be opened here. So now assume I deleted few lines accidentally. So we have total 35 lines and I deleted few lines and I saved this file. So this would be current version of my file, correct? So if I will open this file, I would be able to see only 18 lines. Now, the lines which are deleted by me accidentally, if I have to recover those lines, so I have snapshot here. I can select my snapshot and I will click on promote. Promote means recovering. Click on promote. It will be recovered. If I'll go to now edit tab, you would be able to see my file is recovered. Restored to previous version. That is called snapshot. So you will get snapshot feature on Azure where you would be able to back up your blob data. So this feature is there into Azure. Next option, SAS, permission, granular permission for Azure blob data. So what we can do, like I'm going to open same image and now I have to give some granular permission. So whenever you will open your image, so you will get last tab, generate SAS, shared access signature. Click on SAS, where you can see we have two authentication methods. First is account keys. Second is delegation key. Use a delegation key. So by default is account key and I'm going to use account key here. When it comes to storage account, in storage account, you will get two keys, two redundant keys. Let me show you. Here we have two keys, key 1, key 2, and that is totally up to you. Both keys will be available, active, just because both are parallel to use. So you can use any key, key 1 or key 2 to generate your shared access signature. I'm going with key 1. You can choose again any key. That is totally up to you. Stored access policy, what it is, what I can do, if you'll see here, we will get some advanced options here, like when it comes to permissions. So we have different options into permissions: read, add, create, write, delete, correct? Or we have start time and end time, which is the most valuable feature here. Why? If I'm sharing my blob data publicly over the internet with someone, so if you will share this URL with someone, so it means he can also access, correct? So what I can do, I can enable a time-based access. You can only access this blob data in between this time duration, where I can select start time and end time, correct? So, but whenever I will create SAS, so every time I have to provide this option. I have to configure this option. What we can do, we can create a access policy, correct, in which we can set our permission, default permission, and start time and end time, and UTC, which we can set as a template. So you will select your access policy here, and other options like permissions and start time and time, it will be automatically selected and configured into your SAS policy. Right now I'm going with read permission, but again here you will get granularity as compared to blob access level, correct? Just because in blob access level we have only read access, here you will get granularity. Let me select a read, start time, end time. I'm going with default. You can configure start time, end time based on your requirement. Allowed IP address, what it does mean? It means if I'm sharing this blob file with a particular user or customer of the client, so what I will do, I will ask my client public IP address, correct? And I will provide public IP address of my client in this box, and this blob will be available only for that user who have shared the public IP address. So that is called allowed IP address here. HTTPS only or HTTP and HTTPS. I'm going with secure protocol HTTPS. Let me click on generate SAS token and URL. So you will get one token here, signature, and a URL. Let me copy this URL. Let me paste this URL into chat box. Again, I would request all of you to check. If you will copy and paste this URL into your browser tab, image will be accessible. Same image will be accessible using SAS. Check and confirm if you are able to access image. Great.
Sanjay, I just have a question with regards to the sharing of public URL for blob. Can we have a sample or a sample demo of how to create a temporary server, file server that we can share publicly so that
So,
they
so
can
I'll share
download.
files here. We cannot share publicly. So we will share a link, correct?
Yeah, but
And in
public
yep,
link.
please go ahead. We will share a public link. So where you have to run PowerShell script or a bash script. It depends which type of operating system you're using. And that link, using that link, you would be able to connect your file share on your local system. It will be mounted on your local system.
Okay. But for temporary storage, can we also create
No,
one?
for temporary storage, again, we have to again create script and in which we need to provide time-based access, correct?
Sorry?
We have to create a PowerShell script, correct, or a bash script for temporary access
Okay.
for file share, correct? We can do that, but in that case, we have to create a PowerShell script or bash script.
Things I'm doing up.
Hope that is clear. Okay, so now, as you can see, let me explain this SAS URL. So let me explain you SAS URL. So it will start with HTTPS, and then you can see your storage account name, recognition, then your service name, blob, then DNS suffix of storage account. After then your container name, images. After then your blob name, az-104.jpg. After then your permission. Permission is read. So SAS permission, SAS start time, SAS end time, SAS protocol, HTTPS, signature version, which you can see this would be your signature version. And that is your signature. There is a token, SAS token. So this would be your URL content into SAS whenever you will generate any SAS token. So when you will generate SAS, we can generate two types of SAS, account level and service level. So this SAS is known as, if we are going to enable a SAS for blob, that is known as service level SAS. Whenever you will enable SAS on account level, storage account level, that is known as account level SAS, where you would be able to allow your users to access all the services, like based on your selection, blob service, file service, table service, queue service, using SAS. Here we are only allowing blob, that is known as service level SAS. But if you have to allow blob, table, file, queue with different permissions, so you can create a account level SAS, which I will show you how we will do that. So that is known as blob services. Let me show you one more thing, which would be, let me open a duplicate first. And let me create a virtual machine so that we can understand service endpoint as well, that is networking. And after then we will understand file services. So on duplicate tab, I'm going to create a virtual machine, and along with VM, one VNet will be created by Microsoft. So let me click on create as a virtual machine. Existing resource group, VM name will be VM1. You can give any name. Availability zone, no infrastructure redundancy required. Image will be Windows Server 2022 data center. Rest I'm leaving as it is. Username will be student. Let me add a password, which should be 12 character long. and complex. Next, let me click on review and create. Click on create, virtual machine will be created and you have to create your virtual machine in the same way. So once your virtual machine deployment will be done, I'll show you how we will enable service endpoint and how we are going to limit traffic to our storage account. So click on go to resource. As you can see, my virtual machine deployment is done. And let me connect this virtual machine first. So click on connect, download RDP, run your RDP file, enter your username and password. So enter username and password where you can see I previously shared my image URL and we all are able to access this image publicly. Let me share once again. So right now we all are able to access this image publicly, correct? Now what we want that we can only access the storage account services from this VNet resources like VNet 1 in which we have one subnet, default subnet, in which we have one virtual machine. So here we have, let's assume, storage account into Azure. What I want right now, public access is enabled. So users from internet, if they will send request to my storage account, blob, file, table, queue, so this will be entertained by my storage account based on the permission which we will allow. Correct. But what I want, whenever my user who are managing this virtual machine, if they will send requests over the internet from inside this subnet to my storage account, then this request should be entertained by my storage account. Except then subnet resources, if my storage account is receiving requests from internet, all these requests will be discarded by my storage account. That is called service endpoint. Service endpoint. So let me show you how we will configure service endpoint. Let me close first of all server manager and let me open a Edge browser inside my virtual machine first. So let me go to my storage account. As you can see, I'm able to access this image, and I hope you all are able to access this image. Now let me go to my storage account. Let me go to left hand side, and left hand side you will get security plus networking tab. Under security plus networking you will get networking tab. Under networking tab, for private endpoint we have a separate tab. For service endpoint, here you can see first access is enabled for all network, that means from anywhere. Second is enabled for selected virtual networks and public IP address, that is client IP address. So let me select enable for selected virtual network and IP addresses. Then here you can see we have an option, either I can create a new virtual network or I can add a existing virtual network. Let me select existing virtual network. Existing virtual network, select your VNet, which you can see VM1 VNet, and then you will get one subnet, default subnet. As you can see, service endpoint is required. So we will enable service endpoint. Enabling service endpoint, it can take up to 15 minutes, but generally it will take up to 1 minute. Let me enable it. So it will be enabled, and then we would be able to access this image inside our virtual machine only. Correct? Just because my service endpoint is created. Meanwhile, I would request one participant to share public IP address in the chat box so that I can show you customer client IP address also. So my blob image will be accessible inside my virtual machine only and with client IP address only. So you can check your public IP address into Google by typing my IP address. So search my IP address into Google. You will get your public IP address. Share in the chat box, which I'm going to allow into service endpoint. Where you can see public service endpoint is enabled. Let me click on add, and that is added here. Once it will be added here, if I will click on save, so publicly no one can access this image, only I can access inside this virtual machine. Correct. So let me show you. Let me go to my storage account service. Let me click on save. As you can see now, public service endpoint is enabled. So if I will refresh my browser tab, I will get authorization error, and I hope you all will get authorization error. Let me allow Ashwini only. Correct. So hope no one is able to access this image publicly. Like I'm also not able to access this image publicly. So let me allow only Ashwini so that Ashwini can access, or either I can Ashwini or I can access this image inside my virtual machine. Let me add a public IP address here, my client IP address into firewall. Would request you to refresh your page. I hope you're using SAS. Let me check. Okay, so I would request you to refresh your page. Refreshing page, you will get error. Yes. Now let me allow you. So let me add your IP address here. Let me click on save. So now once this will be updated, So either I can access this image inside my virtual machine or Ashwini can access this image in his system using that IP address which he shared. Now let me copy this URL and let me paste inside my virtual machine as browser. As you can see, image is accessible inside my virtual machine. But outside of virtual machine into my main browser, laptop browser, if I'll refresh this URL, as you can see, I'm not authorized. Correct. So Ashwini, I would request you to check and confirm. Hope you're able to access this image now. Refresh your browser tab. Refresh your browser, sometime caching issue will be there or might be, or you can close your browser and re-enter this URL. So that is called service endpoint, where we can enable service endpoint and we can limit our traffic to a particular IP address, client IP address, or to a subnet resources, so that we would be able to allow our service access to only virtual machines rather than enabling for public access. Correct? So now I'm going to change my access level to again public. Before going on public, Ashwini, I hope you're able to access. Let me go to my storage account and let me enable for all networks for public. Let me click on save. So now I enable public access. After enabling public access, if I will copy and paste my URL once again here, you would be able to see I would be able to access my image here. Correct? After a few refreshes, because caching issue will be there into your browser. So you need to refresh your browser multiple times and you would be able to access your image using that URL which I share. That is called networking into Azure Storage account. Now next option which we are going to check, that is file share. Correct? We will discuss file share after a short break. Then you will add a file share. If you remember, I already explained you that we have by default a limit of 5 TB. So we can enable larger file shares where you will get 100 TB, but you can implement quota on this 5 TB. Correct? Where you can select, like for file share, you're going to use 2 GB, 3 GB for per file share. You are going to use 2 GB, 3 GB, 10 GB, 50 GB that you can decide. That is known as quota limit. I'm going to use my full file share capacity. Let me click on add file share. File share name will be data. Now tier, where you can see based on again your performance, you will select your tier like transaction optimizer, in which you will get high IO, hot, cool, so that you can select based on your performance. I'm going with transaction optimize. Then in transaction optimize, maximum IO will be 1000 per second. Capacity will be 5 TB here. Now let me go to next backup. Backup we are not going to enable for file share. Why? Just because we will understand file share backup into module number 10. And I will show you there how we will enable and how we will restore. So I'm going to disable this feature, but by default that is enabled here. Let me click on review. Let me click on create. File share will be created here, which you can see. Now let me do one thing here, how we will connect this file share to our Azure virtual machine, which you can see here. Let me close this as browser and let me open file explorer inside my virtual machine. So you have to assume that this virtual machine is your on-premise server. Either it would be your on-premise server or it would be Azure virtual machine or any other cloud virtual machine where you want to mount this file share. So as you can see, right now I have only two drives, C and D drive. So when we will mount this share to this virtual machine, we will get another drive. Let me show you how we will do that. So there's an option, click on connect, where you can mount this file share to Windows, to Linux, to Mac, and you will get scripts. So let me mount this to Windows. So select Windows, your drive letter, and how you are going to authenticate using storage account keys. Click on show script. Here you will get PowerShell script, which you have to copy. Now when you are going to mount as a file share on Windows system, you need to remember one thing, that port number 445, it should be open into your firewall. TCP port number 445, it should be open into firewall. If this port is open or enabled into your firewall and still you are facing connection issue, in that case you have to check your ISP as well. Might be this port will be disabled into your ISP side. So this should be enabled into your firewall as well as into your ISP firewall, so that you can connect your file share on your local system. Now let me copy this PowerShell script. So you will copy this PowerShell script and you will run this PowerShell script in your systems where you want to connect this file share. So let me open PowerShell into my virtual machine. Let me run as administrator. Let's paste this PowerShell script here. 1 second, sorry. Let me copy once again. So copy and paste your PowerShell script. It will create a TCP connection first, which you can see. And now your file share will be mounted on this virtual machine and you will get a drive letter set similar to your network file share. As you can see, credentials are added successfully. If I go to my file explorer, there is a file share data which is connected to my virtual machine. If I open, there is no file. If I will create any file or if I will save any file here, it will be available on all systems where this file share will be mounted, as well as into your Azure cloud file share. So let me create few files here. Now if I'll go to my storage account, let me go to left hand side, click on browse, where you would be able to see the 3 files available. If I will upload any data inside this file share, this would be also available on the virtual machine. So synchronous, so replication will be there and it will be available on all mounted system. Let me upload it. So where you can see now I have uploaded few images. Let me go to virtual machine, and as you can see, images are available on my virtual machine as well. Just because same file share is connected to all systems and connected to my virtual machine, so you will get same data on all system. That is called Azure file share. I hope this topic is clear to everyone. If you have any query, you can ask a question.
Sanjay, I just have a question with regards to the blob storage, right? Is it with a similar concept or is separate feature for Azure?
Pardon please. Which
Uh,
blob type?
the for this is still part of the blob storage
Mhm.
permissions, right? Or it's already separate? Uh,
So blob means container services into Azure Storage, correct?
yeah.
And if I open any container, so let me open any blob. Yeah.
Okay. So the file share that you demoed earlier is
Mhm.
it's a separate
Correct. So
okay.
file share, basically we are using SMB protocol, correct? And we have to mount our file share manually into the systems which we want, where we want to connect this file share, correct? When it comes to blob, So in blob, you will get a URL. Correct? It means blob will be accessible over a REST API using HTTP and HTTPS protocol. Correct? When it comes to file share will be accessible using SMB protocol, server message block protocol.
Okay, so uh, for SMB, that's only for internal, right? So what do you
Correct.
suggest if it's for public? How do we
So for public, you can use blob containers. Na?
okay. So we'll just put
Yeah.
containers. Okay,
So if
okay.
my requirement is public, I will store my data into blob container. Correct. If I have to connect my file share or my storage as a shared storage. Now, what is file share? File share is a shared storage. Correct. If you will compare with on-premise, so into on-premise, we have two types of storage: SAN, storage area network, and NAS, network attached storage. Correct. So network attached storage means you will get one storage which you can connect to multiple systems. Correct. So if you will store any data inside the storage, so this data will be available for all the systems where this storage is mounted. That is known as NAS, network attached storage, or file share, you can say. When it comes to blob, and you will access this file share using SMB or NFS. It depends on you. So SMB is the default into Microsoft. Correct. And when it comes to blob, so blob we are using over the internet publicly using HTTP and HTTPS protocol. Hope that is clear.
Very clear. Thank you, Sanjay.
Welcome. Okay, Nashad, do you have any query? You raise your hand.
This happen.
Oh, no worries. Okay, so let me show you how we will take snapshot for file share. So similar to blob, we can take snapshot for file share as well. Let me open my file share. Left hand side, you will get a option snapshots. Go to snapshots tab, click on add snapshot. You have to give a comment like a label. So like I'm going to give a label first. Let me click on OK. So one snapshot will be there. Now let me go back to browse tab and let me delete few files. Like I'm going to delete this AWS and AZ104. Now I have to, if I have to recover those files, so I'll go back to snapshots. I will open snapshot where you would be able to see all files are available. I can restore complete snapshot or I can restore few files as well. That is totally up to me. So let me click on three dots on AWS. Let me click on restore. So we have two options: restore as a copy and rename and overwrite original file. So if you want to restore as a different file, you can select first option. Let me click on overwrite original file. Click on OK. And then AZ104, restore, overwrite original file. Let me go back to my snapshots file share where you would be able to see both files are recovered. So that's how we can create snapshot and we would be able to recover our files if your files will be deleted accidentally. Otherwise, by default retention, soft delete is enabled on file share where you would be able to recover your blob or your file share in between 7 days. Now, next topic is tools. When it comes to managing and accessing Azure storage account, so when it comes to managing and storing Azure storage account, what different types of tools are available through which we would be able to access our or manage our storage account? So when it comes to tools, so into Azure, like assume I have Azure account A, then in my organization we have multiple accounts for Azure A, B, and C, in which we have storage accounts. So being a storage administrator, I have to manage all these storage accounts which we have in different Azure accounts in my organization. How I will manage this? Because it means I have to log in into multiple portals. correct, and which would be difficult for me when it comes to flexibility. So how I can manage all storage account from a centralized place? So in that case, we will use a tool that is known as Storage Explorer, which will be provided by Microsoft as a client tool, which you can download, you can install inside your local system, and you can connect your all storage account from different subscriptions, tenants, and accounts, Azure accounts, which you can manage from centralized place. That is known as Storage Explorer. Let me show you how we will, from where we will download and how we will use Storage Explorer. So let me go inside my virtual machine. Let me open as browser. So assume this would be my local system where I'm going to use my client tool to manage my storage account. Search, download Azure Storage Explorer for Windows. This would be your keywords. Click on Azure Storage Explorer. Sorry. Let me scroll down. First link is for creating free account, free tier account. So this would be your link where you can download Explorer tool. Let me copy and paste this link into the chat box. Now let me download this tool. So you can click on download now. As you can see, we can select our operating system, correct? I'm going with Windows. The tool will be downloaded for Windows. Once it will be downloaded, we will install this tool inside our local system. So let me click on open file. Click on install, either for you or for all user. I'm going with all user, accept license agreement. Click on install. Next, next, it will be installed. Once it will be installed, so you have to provide your credentials so that you can connect your storage account. It means you should have permissions as well as you should have access on your storage account so that you can access and manage your storage services. Again, what different options are available, I'm going to show you so that you can understand. And again, based on your requirement, you can provide your permissions. So let me launch this Storage Explorer inside this virtual machine. As you can see, Storage Explorer is now open inside my virtual machine. So how we can connect our storage services, storage account inside this tool, local tool. So again, using tool means we are not going to access Azure portal. And for storage account, we are all the storage accounts which would be in different subscriptions, different tenants, or in different Azure accounts. All storage accounts will be connected to this storage tool and centralize you would be able to manage all storage services here, being a storage admin. So in center you can see, if you'll scroll down from right hand side, you will get an option here, connect Azure resources. You need to click on it. After then you will get multiple options, like you can connect your subscription, storage account or services, blob containers or directory. We have multiple options here. I'm going with second option, storage account and services. So click on storage account and services. if you are working as a storage admin, then we have three options here. Connection string. So whenever you will generate a SaaS URL, you will get connection string as well, along with SaaS, as well as for each key, that means Azure Storage key, authentication key, you will get a connection string as well. So either you can use your SaaS connection string or your Azure key connection string to connect your storage account. Second option, you can use your SaaS URL. Third option, you can use your keys directly here. Let me select first option. Let me show you first option, then we will test second option, and you would be able to understand how we are going to connect. So first I'm going to use account name and keys. Let me click on next. Here you need to provide your display name, like I'm going to give you a display name demo, and after then your account name and your account key. So let me go to my storage account. Let me scroll down from left hand side and let me go to configuration and points. No, let me go to properties tab. Sorry, under account keys. One. So here under network security and networking, you will get access keys. Under access keys, you will get your storage account name. So copy your storage account name. So navigation options are now changed into services in Azure services. So previously all the features are available to storage properties, but now properties is not available. So let me copy my storage account name, which you can copy from here under access key, and then paste here under account name section, then account key. Go back to your storage account services, and under keys you can see we have two keys, key 1, key 2. Both keys are active and both are redundant. So for each key you will get a connection string. So if you are going to use first option here, like you're going to connect your storage account using connection string, key connection string, so you can either copy this key connection string or SaaS connection string to connect your storage account. Now what would be difference between key connection string and SaaS connection string? We'll explain you. Let me click on key, show key, just because I selected key. Let me copy my key and let me paste my key here. So you can choose any key, key 1 or key 2, that is totally up to you. Now click on next and click on connect. Your storage account will be connected here, which you can see here left hand side, demo. In brackets, this is you will get key. If you will expand, you will get all services here. Now using key, it means if I'm connecting my storage account using key or key connection string, I will get full administrative privilege. Correct? So let me show you. If I'll go to blob containers, so you would be able to see I'm able to expand blob containers. If I go to images, I would be able to see all the blobs here which we uploaded. If I want to delete any, let me select and let me delete. So I can delete, I can perform any action. Also delete snapshot, yes. So I can perform any action, create, modify, delete, just because I have full access, I have full privilege, just because I connected this storage account using key here. So sharing key means you are sharing your administrative privilege, correct? If I will expand file service, you would be able to see I'm able to see files. I can manage queue, I can manage table with full administrative privilege. Next option, let me detach this. So it means if I'm a storage admin, I can use key to connect my storage account, just because I'm going to manage all storage services with full permission. But what if I'm going to share this storage account and particular storage service like blob or file share or queue or table services with someone? In that case, sharing key will be vulnerable practice. Just because sharing key means you're going to share full administrative privilege with someone, which we don't want. In that case, we need again granularity. When it comes to granularity, we have SaaS option, shared access signature. Now, how we will configure shared access signature for account? So that is called account level SaaS here now. So again, under security plus networking, you will get shared access signature. Now under shared access signature, you can see we have multiple options. Like I can share only blob services, file services, queue services, table services. Again, it depends on me which type of service I'm going to share. Might be I'm going to share all services. So allowed resource type, service, containers, objects inside your container. Then permission, what type of permission you are going to allow to your user who is going to connect the storage account using this SAS URL, correct, or connection string. Let me only enable blob. So I'm going to remove access for file, queue, and table. I'm only going to share access for blob, and in blob I'm going to only share read, list, access. Rest I'm leaving as it is. Scroll down here, you can enable again time-based retention. You can allow to a particular IP address. Protocol will be HTTPS only. You can select your key, either 1 or 2, totally up to you. Let me click on generate connection string. You can see here you will connection string on SAS URL. So if you will select blob SAS URL or account SAS URL, just SAS URL. So in that case, you will select this option. If you are going to select connection string, which would be SAS, then you will select first option. Let me select his third option and let me go back to my tool. Let me again go to connect Azure resources tab. Which resource? Storage and account service. Second option for URL, shared access signature URL. Click on next, paste your URL here. Click on next, connect. As you can see now, my storage account is connected and I'm only able to see blob container here. I have permission to list. I have permission to read, but there's no permission to create and to modify and to delete. So except then read, I cannot perform any action. Let me show you. Let me delete this image. Let's check. You will get error while deleting any blob. As you can see, fail to start delete insufficient credential. That means you don't have permission. Correct. So you can use Storage Explorer and you would be able to connect multiple storage accounts here from different Azure accounts, from different subscription, from different tenants with different permission, and you would be able to manage all the storage accounts from a centralized place. So totally up to you how you're going to manage a storage account, either through portal, from multiple accounts, from multiple browser, or using storage account. That is totally up to you. That is called Storage Explorer tool. Similarly, we have a tool which is known as AZ Copy to upload and download data from local system to cloud and cloud to local system. Correct? Let me show you that also. AZ Copy. So we will go to again browser where we will search Azure SDK tools. Let me share this link in the chat box. Now, here left hand side you will get tools tab. On tools tab you can see you will get multiple tools, different types of tools like Azure CLI, PowerShell. So here we have a tool AZ Copy. Let me click on documentation of AZ Copy. Here you will get option download AZ Copy. Click on download AZ Copy. So where you are going to run AZ Copy for Windows, for Linux, for Mac, you will select your operating system and operating system version, where I'm going to use Windows 64-bit. Let me click on it and it will be downloaded inside your virtual machine or inside your local system. Let me go to location, downloads folder, and let me extract this folder. Just because you will get a zip file. Extract, then open your extracted folder. in which you will get AZ copy tool. Copy this tool from here. Copy this tool. Go to this PC. Go to C drive so that you will get an easy location, an easy path. Create a folder here. Like I'm going to create a folder, AZ copy. Now inside this folder, I'm going to paste this tool. Correct? Once this tool will be pasted inside this location, open command prompt in your local system and run as administrator. Go to the same path where you have your tool. In C drive, cd az copy, and here if you will run dir command, you would be able to see azcopy.exe file is there. After then, you will use commands to manage AZ copy. Let me check if it is available on my desktop. So these are the commands which we are going to use. I will upload this command file into the Google Drive so that you all would be able to perform this lab. So first of all, to use AZ copy, it doesn't matter that you are your account admin. You have to enable permission to yourself as well so that you can manage the storage services. Now how you will manage a permission? So first you will search your subscription in which you have your storage account, which you are going to manage through AZ copy tool. So go to your subscription. Left hand side on your subscription, go to access control. It means you have to allow yourself or to your users who are going to manage your storage account using AZ copy. So go to access control tab, click on add role assignments, and under job function role, you will search storage blob. So you can see here we have permission storage blob data contributor. So if I will assign this permission to myself, so what I can do with AZ copy, allow to read, to write, and to delete access. For Azure storage containers and data, it means I will get permission to manage blob containers. So let me select this permission. Let me click on next. Let me assign this permission to myself. So let me search here my email ID. Let me click on select and let me click on review and assign. So role assignment is failed. Why? If you will read my error, just because previously I already assigned this role. So if you will read this, the role assignment is already exists. That's why this role assignment is failed. Just because again I'm delivering multiple trainings, so I already assigned. Let me go back to role assignments tab here on IAM so that I can show you that is already assigned to me. Storage blob data contributor. So let me delete and let me show you once again. Let me remove role assignment. That's how you can remove role assignment for any user anytime. Let me remove this role assignment for Azure user 3 as well, which I'm not using right now. Let me click on add role assignment once again. Storage blob data contributor. Next, select member. Search your user account whom you're going to assign this role. Next. So if you want, you can add conditions as well, which I'm not going to do right now. So role will be assigned to me. Once role will be assigned, this would be your first step after downloading and installing your AZ copy tool. If you will not assign RBAC role as your ID authentication to your user, you cannot access your storage account using AZ copy. Once you will done with this, now you have to log in. And for login, if you have multiple tenants, let me show you, which I have. Here you can see I have multiple tenants. So if you have multiple tenants, then log in with your tenant ID. In which tenant you have your storage account. So you have to copy tenant ID of your storage account. Copy this tenant ID and go to your command where you can see az copy space login, then tenant ID. So you have to run this command. You have to execute this command. Let me copy and paste once again. If you have single tenant, then you can use az copy login command simply. If you have multiple tenants, then you have to provide your tenant ID. So az copy space login, then space double hyphen tenant hyphen ID equals to your tenant ID in which you have your storage account. Press enter. As you can see, you will get a URL. Copy this URL. Open as browser so that you can authenticate yourself. Paste this URL into browser. Press enter. It will ask you to type your device code which you have into your command prompt. In same output, let's copy this code and paste into your browser. Sorry. And click on next. It will ask you to enter your user ID and password, email ID and password, or user ID or password. Click on continue. So as you can see on command prompt, you will get confirmation that login succeeded. Once you will get this confirmation, now you can manage those blob storage, that means container services into Azure Storage account. Now let me go back to my storage account services. Let me open my storage account. Let's go to container services just because I only allowed container permission to myself for agent copy. Here you can see we have 3 containers. So let me show you next command how we will create a new container. So az copy space make, then https and your storage account name. So for me, my storage account name is Sanjay Cognitia. So let me change my storage account name, Sanjay Cognitia. Correct. And then .blob.co.windows service which you are, for which you are allowed service URL, and then your folder name, container name, which you want to create. If you want to remember your URL endpoint, so it's simple to find. Go back to your storage account, left hand side on your storage account, go to endpoints tab under settings. Here you will get your blob service URL, which you can see same https sanjaycognitia.blob.co.windows.net. Copy this URL, go back to this command file, and inside quotes replace this URL with your storage account URL. And now copy and paste this command in your command prompt. Press enter. First it will check your Azure AD authentication, and as you can see successfully created the resource. If you will go back to your container services, so you can see test AZ copy container is created through AZ copy, but right now there's no content available. So let's do one thing. Let's go to your file explorer of your local system or this virtual machine. Let me go to data file. Let me copy a few files from here and let me create a folder into C drive. Folder name will be data, and let me paste my data inside this folder. Now this would be the content which I have to move into cloud, from local system to cloud. So this data is available in C drive of local system, which I have to upload into test AZ copy container inside cloud here. How I will do that? We have a command here which you can see. AZ copy, copy, then local path, source, and then destination. So let me do one thing. Let me copy destination path, which you can see here as your container service and my container name. Let me replace here. After then my local system path, which would be C drive. Under C drive we have data folder, and inside data folder whatever content we have, all contents, all files, all blobs will be uploaded here. Okay, that's why I'm using star here. Let me copy this command. So copy this command, paste inside your command prompt. So files will be uploaded here, which you can see. The process will be started. Number of files transferred 6, which you can see, and total number of files which are transferred. Number 6, there is no fail transaction. If you want, you can go to your storage account, click on refresh. Here you can see all files are uploaded. This is how we can upload files and folders into cloud using AZ copy. This will be our last tool. Hope this tool is clear to everyone. Again, if you have any query, you can ask a question. Great. If there's no query, then we are done with practical lab session of this module. Let me show you now. Next, theory part. So if you remember, we already discussed about storage services, where we have 4 types of services: container, table, queue, file services. And for each service, you will get a separate container, separate URL. We can use custom DNS name, which we already discussed in our last session. We can enable service endpoint to limit our network traffic for either to a public address, public IP address, or to a virtual network subnet, which we already discussed. So creating storage account, configuring storage account, we are already done with this. Next lesson, configuring blob storage, which we already completed. Let's review. So blob is basically used for unstructured data storage in the cloud. So you can store any type of text or binary data like pictures, movies, images, movies, text file, document file, PDF file, Excel sheets. Also referred as a object storage. Common use cases where you can use your container services, blob services, serving images and documents directly to browser. So through browser, you can share your data, your content. Storing files for distributed access, streaming videos and audios for your websites, storing data for backup and restore, disaster recovery, archiving, storing data for analysis by on-premise Azure hosted services, where I can enable Azure Data Lake Generation 2 service. So these are the use cases for blob storage. When it comes to blob, so you will create a container. All blob must be inside a container. Account have unlimited container number. There is no limitation. Containers can have unlimited blobs. Restrict access using public access level, where you can see we have 3 types of access level: private, blob, and container, which we already discussed. Tier. So we have hot tier, we have cool tier, we have cold tier, we have archive tier. Hot tier, data that is accessed or modified frequently. Cool tier, data that is infrequently accessed or modified, stored at least for 30 days. That means if you are going to use cool tier, you have to store your data for 30 days. That is the minimum duration to store your data. Cold tier, data that is infrequently accessed or modified and stored for 90 days. It means minimum duration to store your data is 90 days. Third is archive. Fourth is archive, sorry. Data can be tolerate several hours of retrieval. So in hot, cool and cold, you will not face latency. When it comes to archive, again, you have to wait for retrieving your data. If you can wait for several hours of retrieval, then you can store your data into archive tier. This would be most cheapest tier in the Azure. Will remain in the archive tier for at least 180 days. That means minimum duration to store your archives will be 180 days. So how I would know that I have archive data, cold data, cool data or hot data? How I would know? So I don't know my access pattern. I'm storing data, but I'm not aware about my access pattern. So what we can do, if we cannot decide, so we will create a lifecycle management rule in which we will provide a rule like initially I'm uploading all data into hot tier. If I'm not accessing any data more than 30 days, it should move into cool tier. If I'm not accessing any data more than 90 days, it should move into archive. If I'm not accessing any data more than 365 days, it should be deleted. So I can create my lifecycle management rule. So my data will automatically transit from one tier to another tier. And once it will reach to the limit, it will be deleted. Correct. So transitioning of blobs to a cooler storage so that we can optimize performance as well as cost. Just because storing data into hot, higher charges will be there. Hope I'm audible to all of you.
Now you're audible. Yeah.
Ah,
So,
okay. So let me go back to my slide. We can create life cycle management rule so that my data can transit into multiple storage tiers and I can save cost and as well as I can optimize my data. So again, by default, your storage will be hot tier, correct? But storing data into hot tier will be the most expensive option. And if we are not aware about our access pattern, so we can create a lifecycle management rule and based on that our data will be transited from one tier to another tier. So you can create lifecycle management rule into Azure. Replication. So again, we already discussed about replication. Replication will be asynchronous to any other reason, minimize latency for read request, increase efficiency for compute workload, optimize data distribution and cost. And replication will be always asynchronous. So creating and configuring container, managing blobs in the container, we are already done with this. Next option, configuring storage security. When it comes to security, so we can enable storage service encryption SSE, which is by default enabled in all storage account nowadays. Authentication with Azure AD and RBAC. In AZ copy, hope you remember, I enabled authentication using RBAC for myself. Client-side encryption we can enable. HTTPS protocol will be enabled automatically. By default, SMB 3.0 data in transit encryption we can configure. Azure disk encryption. So whenever you will use Azure disk, again by default AES 256 with key encryption will be there on Azure disk. Shared access signature we can use for delegating our users. Shared key we can use. Encrypted signature strings we can use. Anonymous access to containers through which we can enable read permission. So we have different options for security. So we can create shared access signature, service level. We can create shared access signature for account level. This would be your SaaS URI, which I already explained you. So storage, resource level, and SaaS token for account level. So generate a shared access signature, review the configuration permission, use the SaaS URL to test permission. We are already done with this. Determining storage service encryption, which we already discussed, plus discuss once again. So when it comes to SSE, that is by default enabled. So protect your data for security and compliance, automatically encrypts and decrypts your data, encrypts through 256-bit AES encryption, is enabled for all new and existing storage accounts and cannot be disabled. That is transparent to all users. Now, you can use customer managed key as well. If you remember, while deploying storage account, we already discussed about this part. So we can create customer managed key. Use the Azure Key Vault service to manage your encryption keys. Create your own encryption keys and store them into Key Vault. Use Azure Key Vault's API to generate encryption keys. Custom keys give you more flexibility and control just because you can decide your key length and your encryption methods. And based on that, you would be able to generate and secure your data. You will be able to generate your keys and you can secure your data, encrypt and decrypt your data. When it comes to best practices for storage security, always use HTTPS to create or distribute a SaaS. Reference a stored access policy. Now, what is stored access policy? Hope you remember. While generating SaaS, we can create a template. Let me show you. So while generating a SaaS, we can create a template. Let me go back to my container services. Let me open images container. Left hand side, you will get access policy. Under access policy, you will get here option to stored access policy. Click on add. Let me give a name which will be demo here. Permission, read and list, which I'm going to allow for SaaS. Start time, let me select a start time here. Sorry. Let me select my permission once again. Start time, end time, click on OK. So this policy will be created here. Let me click on save. Now go back to your container. Now if I'll open any blob, I'll go to generate SaaS. So rather than selecting permission and start time, end time, what I'll do, I'll go to stored access policy. I will select my policy which I created and you would be able to see permission and start time, end time. It will be grayed out just because that is already configured into stored access policy. So you can create a template which you can use as a reference. So reference stored access policy where possible. Use near time expiration time on ad hoc SaaS. Use storage analytics to monitor your application. Be careful with start time of SaaS. Be specific with the resource to be accessed just because you will be charged. Understand that your account will be built for any uses. Validate data writing using SaaS. So we can validate this because in SaaS you have permission to create, to modify. So we can validate our users to write blobs using SaaS. Don't assume the SaaS is the always correct choice. We can use RBAC also. Role-based access control also for security. So securing storage accounts, we are already done with this. Implementing storage security, we are done with this. Configuring Azure files. So when it comes to comparison between Azure files and blobs, which I already explained, let's review once again. So using file, we are going to use SMB interface. Using blobs, we are going to use REST over HTTP and HTTPS protocol. Client libraries and REST interface that allows access from anywhere to stored files. When to use lift and shift an application to cloud. If you want to move an application or migrate to an application to cloud, you can use file share. Stored shared data to multiple virtual machines, we can use file share. Store deployment and debugging tools that needs to be accessed from many virtual machines. If you have teams of developers who need same debugging tool, so you can create a file share in which you can store your development or debugging tool and which you can mount to your developer's system. When it comes to blobs, supports streaming and random access scenario, application data, access application data from anywhere over HTTP, over your browser basically, using HTTP and HTTP protocols. Manage file share. So you can implement file share quota just because by default limit is 5 TB. So you can implement a quota. You can mount on Windows, but you have to ensure that port number 445 should be open. TCP port number 445, it should be open. In Linux you can mount, in Mac you can mount. Secure transfer it required where SMB 3.0 encryption you can implement for data in transit. Creating snapshot for file share. We are already done with this. So creating and restoring. So create a file share and upload a file, explore snapshot, we are already done with this. Configuring storage with tools, that is optional now in this syllabus. It means, so things which will be optional into certification, it means you will not get questions. So I can tailor now this PPT, correct, based on the audience. I'm not going to remove. Why? Just because I want to explore all those things to all of you so that you can understand all the storage services. So we have tools, Storage Explorer tool, which I already explained you, AZ copy, and this import and export service, which I'm going to explain you now. So what is import and export service? Let me go back to import and export service. So basically what happens if I have to move data from local data center. Let's assume this would be my on-prem DC data center, and this would be cloud in which I have my storage account. And now I have to move my data from data center to storage account. So first option, I can move online. Online using the Storage Explorer, AZ copy, or my portal. I can use tools or I can use portal to upload my data. What if I have large amount of data? So it will take time, correct? So, and I have to wait. What I will do rather than waiting for uploading my data or migrating my data from local system to Azure, I will use import and export service. In import and export service, I have to create a job for importing data. So you will create a job, import job, correct, in which you will provide your details, your shipping courier, that is courier information, and then your nearest data center, Azure data center. So you will create an import job in which you will select like I'm going to store my data into my disk. So you will upload your data into your disk, and this disk you will ship to Azure data center, nearest data center. They will receive this disk and they will upload your data just because you will provide this information into your job detail. That means in which storage account, in which blob container you want to upload your data. You will provide all these details into job details, correct? So when you will provide this detail, Azure will upload your data into your specified container, and once this will be uploaded, they will ship back this disk to you, correct? Just because you are, again, you're providing your shipping information. Now when it comes to export service, it means when we have to download bulk amount of data. Again, if we are downloading online, it would be difficult. Where if it would be a larger size, 5 TB, 8 TB, 10 TB, correct? So what we will do, we will create a job again, export, where we will prepare a empty disk, which we will ship to the Azure data center. They will receive disk and they will upload data locally into your disk, and then they will ship back this to you, but they will implement encryption on this disk. They will lock this disk using BitLocker encryption. So you will receive disk, you will unlock your disk, and after that you would be able to retrieve your data. That is called import and export service. There's one more thing, one more service, again in respect to architect level. So we can use import and export service, but what when it comes to, let's assume 30 TB data. So it means might be I don't have 30 TB disk available inside my data center, free disk. How I will upload data? What if I have to upload 70 TB data? I have to move 70 TB data. In that case, I cannot use import and export service. What I will do, what I can do, I can request Azure to provide me Azure data disk. Again, that is not in our certification, and you will not get any question into your exam. So we have two options, Azure data disk and Azure data box. If you don't have disk inside your data center and where you have to move larger amount of data, so Azure data disk, you can request maximum 5 disk. Each disk contain 8 TB storage. So assume I requested for 5 disk. It means I will get 4 TB storage and usable storage will be 35 TB. So up to 35 TB data I can move using Azure data disk, and I have to pay to Azure. If I have larger than 35 TB data which I have to move, I will request Azure data box. So data box in which you will get 100 TB storage and usable will be 80 TB storage. Correct? So data box which will be connected to RJ45 port and Azure data disk which will be connected on USB port. So you can request. So in respect to architecting, we should have knowledge of all the services, all the options, different options which we can use and we can utilize. So we are done with this module number 7. If you have any query, you can ask your question.